And at the same time, I think we live in this tension of wanting to arrive and also feeling like it's too late and we've missed the opportunity, or we've missed our prime, or we've this kind of chasing suspicion that there were windows where we could, go live a bigger life, and we didn't, and we missed it. And so I think it's that duality that we kind of constantly live in, and the opportunity is to know that it's never too late for anything.
Allie, thank you so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this. We were just talking before we hopped on. I think the first time we met would be like 14 years ago. And so I feel like this has been 14 years in the making.
Totally.
And I have just like watched your journey from, I would say afar, but it's like Facebook afar or Instagram afar. Yeah. And I'm just so proud of all the things you've done and you're building. And so to get to sit down with you, I'm just super excited. And if I'm not mistaken, you have a birthday coming up.
I do. Yeah. I do this weekend. You're so sweet.
Yeah. As we're recording, we're just about 3 days away. The birthday's on January 22nd, which is very fitting and makes this book of yours have even more meaning, which is 22 Letters to a Young Woman Searching for Meaning. And I want you to just start off telling us a little bit about the original idea and especially the concept, the way that it's written, because the structure's a little bit, it's very unique. It's a little unusual. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I love it. Well, and it's so good to see you, Mary. And I just love how worlds kind of connect and collide, and just the being able to see each other over the long haul of our careers it's just really, really sweet. It's really, really, really fun to be here. And what's also really neat is that the idea for 22 came around the time that you and I met, actually. It was probably right around the time I was dreaming. Yeah, it would have been within like a month or so of me dreaming that book up.
Wow, so that's crazy.
Yeah. When I was graduating from college as a 22-year-old, I pulled an all-nighter with one of my best girlfriends at the time, and just was kind of bemoaning the fact that I felt like everything in life had been planned out until that point. And suddenly it felt like we were launching off a cliff with no idea where we were going or how we were going to land or what it meant to fly. And so it felt like there was all of this pressure to do it all, be it all, have our lives figured out. And I said at that time to my friend, I said, I wish there was a book that was written specifically into this season of life for young women, asking all of these existential questions that we're sitting here asking about what does it mean to live a life with purpose and make an impact and make career decisions, and how do we live with authenticity and answer all of these questions. And so that book doesn't exist. So whatever I do career-wise, I'm going to write that book someday, and it needs to be called 22. Yeah. So that was the seed of the idea. And it was many years later in my late 20s, almost 30s, that I was able to actually publish that book with HarperCollins. So it was a really, really grateful to have actually been able to make that come to life.
Yeah. And you structure it. You say you kind of take like all of the young women you're speaking to, and you kind of create this fictional Ashley that you're writing letters to, like you're having a correspondence with, which makes it feel so personal. And so like, I don't know, you just feel like you as the reader are sitting there reading the letter as if you're Ashley. And I wondered if like the concept for that or like the spark for that had anything to do, because you do also mention C.S. Lewis. So is it anything to do with like screw tape letters, but like in the opposite?
Yes, screw tape letters in the opposite. Yes, I would joke that it's, when I describe the book, I'd say it's screw tape letters meets Little Women in the 21st century, but no demons. Yeah. I was in I was actually, so at the time I was working in anti-trafficking and human rights and was on a work trip to London and was super jet lagged. This is a few years after I just kind of made that statement that I wanted to write this book.
Mm.
And I woke up in the middle of the night, like with the, it was like I couldn't turn my brain off, and it was a mile a minute, and I just had this revelation of, oh my word, it's not a how-to book. It's a relationship.
Mm.
It's a series of letters, because I want to write to the reader personally, and I want them to feel like every letter is written to them. And so it's to a fictional character where you as the reader actually kind of insert yourself into the story.
Yeah.
So you're both learning the character, but also becoming the character at the same time. And thankfully, the kind folks at Thomas Nelson took a leap on me, because it was a very unusual format. But C.S. Lewis had pioneered it, so I was going in good footsteps.
Yeah, I love that. Like we said, you are about to have a birthday. I think that's a good time for some reflection. And something
Yeah.
that kind of occurred to me as I was reading the book. And by the way, you are a beautiful writer. You are a beautiful
Oh,
writer.
that's so
Normally, when I read
kind.
books for this show, I kind of put on more of my like law school hat and kind of like read 300
Yeah.
pages in one night really quickly. And I started reading your book and I was like, no, I'm going to take my time with this. I'm going to savor this.
Oh,
It's so beautiful and so well written.
wow. Thank you.
I think something that's interesting, it kind of occurred to me as I'm reading the book, um, noticing the birthday coming up. I went and checked out the Instagram. The book is to this young woman searching for meaning. And your most recent Instagram post basically is talking about you are not too old and it is not too late. It's a post that you
Mm-hmm.
shared. And so it made me wonder, do you feel like in the 5 years that your book has come out, the reader you picture in your head that you're talking to, the like target audience, your heart for a certain group of women has started to
Yeah.
change to women who are feeling
Mm.
like, time is running out or it's starting to feel late? Or was that just like a meme that you liked? Like, is that representing a shift for Allie, or
Yeah.
where are we there?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's a both and, because I think that whole sentiment of you are not too old and it is not too late. I felt that way when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I would have moments of
Yes.
feeling like, oh, I can't go learn piano because I'm 15 now. And if you were going to be good at piano, you had to start way younger. And I quit when I was 5. And so I think we kind of live with that our whole lives, of
Mm,
this tension of waiting to arrive, waiting to get somewhere, which is really the, I like to say, the moral of the story of the book of 22 is that the journey is the destination. You never arrive.
mm,
Life is about the process and what is done in us and through us and worked out in the process of living, all of the good and all of the mess, and embracing that process is where like true life and purpose and meaning is found. And at the same time, I think we live in this tension of wanting to arrive and also feeling like it's too late and
yeah.
we've missed the opportunity, or we've missed our prime, or we've this kind of chasing suspicion that there were windows where we could, go live a bigger life, and we didn't, and we missed it. And so I think it's that duality that we kind of constantly live in.
Yeah.
And the opportunity is um to know that it's never too late for anything. If something is, I mean, the whole reason I went to business school was when I was writing the book, I had I, for whatever reason, was sitting in my New York apartment thinking, okay, what are my biggest life regrets? And I was like, well, I regret I never went to business school.
Mm,
And at the time I was like, then why don't I just go?
yeah.
And I applied on a whim. So that would be my encouragement, is trust the process, and just at the same time know that it's never too late if a dream keeps chasing you.
Yeah. I love that. Total side note, not on my list of questions, but do you know what your Enneagram number is?
I'm a 3. I'm a
Are
3,
you a
consummate overachiever.
Are you a three wing two, three wing four?
I think I'm actually 3 wing 4. I
Mm,
thought for a
yeah,
long time it was a 2 because I love helping and connecting people, but the 4
yeah,
I think is the dreamer, visionary. I feel like sometimes I see things other people don't see, and that's
yeah.
my gift and curse.
Yes. So the reason I ask is for a very, very long time I thought I was a three wing four, and I now think
Mm.
I'm a four wing three. But it's like, 50,
Mm.
50, 49, whatever, 51, 49.
Yeah.
But when you said I was sitting in my apartment for no particular reason, thinking about what are my biggest regrets, I was like, 4. Enneagram
That's
4.
amazing.
100%. I just ponder that on the daily, basically. So I
Right,
super
exactly.
understand that. I want to talk about this too, though, like, this feeling of where we want to arrive, we want to get somewhere. There's a part where you kind of talk about this confession that you had of like, you feel like you've been waiting to get somewhere your whole life. For as
Mm.
long as I can remember, I've had a deep-seated sense that one day I was going to arrive, that I would wake up one morning, stretch out my arms to the world, and revel in a sense of a finished self, probably around the age of 35. And I just so fully understand that. That is, I would say, in a nutshell, the summary of these 2 books. These are this is my
Wow.
first book, Dirt, that came out
Yeah.
in 2020. This is Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots, that's coming out in April. And this whole season of the podcast, that's kicked off in January. My first episode was a solo episode, and then we're having some solo episodes, some guest episodes, but it's all going to come under this umbrella of like this concept of slow growth equals strong roots, which is also the tagline for the podcast. And
Love
it's this
it.
idea of giving up overachieving for your worth, or giving up achieving or performing in general for
Yeah.
your worth.
Yeah.
And so it made me kind of wonder, there's a part, and you've mentioned this already, there's a part where you say that you had always imagined when you were applying to college, and, this book is kind of written from that perspective of you reflecting back on that time of your life. You said, I believed I was going to go to some legendary East Coast school, but then you walked on the campus of Westmont and you knew that that was where you were meant to go. So first of all, just talk a little
Mm.
bit about that.
Mm. I think the biggest life decisions that we make ultimately don't come from a logic knowing, they come from an inner knowing,
Yeah.
where sometimes you have to trust that intuition. I realized recently I've never once in my life, I've regretted not following my intuition, but I've never regretted following my intuition.
Yeah.
And so in my head, logically, I had this whole plan for what I wanted that university experience to look like. But in my deeper inner knowing and in that intuition, I set foot on the campus of this teeny tiny school that no one had ever heard of and was like, this is my home. This is where I'm supposed to be. And then it was just fixated on, it was almost even a worry about, the college application process and all of that just dissipated because it was like I knew where I was meant to move towards.
Yeah. So, gosh, like just the fact that the whole book, actually, one of my favorite things, like when I saw this, the philosophy student in me like came alive, that all of the different chapters start
Mm.
with on something. So the fact that the
Yeah.
very first chapter is on seasons and arriving, and I just want to kind of camp here for a little while, that made my heart really happy. And I laughed out loud. There's a part where you talked about, I thought I was going to go to law school, so I better major in political science and philosophy. And that is exactly what I did.
Really?
I double majored in
Really?
political science and philosophy to go to law school. And so I was like, yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
understand that.
We're cut from the same cloth. I
Yeah,
love it.
that's right. And so, I want to talk a little bit about, you go to Westmont, like you thought, hey, I just feel like I'm going to go to this like legendary East Coast school. Then you go to Westmont. Then a few years later, you end up going to Oxford for the MBA. And
Mhm.
was there any part of that in the lens of this idea of arriving or accomplishing or achieving for our worth that you felt like that was you still checking any kind of box, or like
Mm.
the list is not complete? And like, where did that idea of wanting to go to a certain kind of school come from in the first place?
Yeah. Law school had always been just a childhood dream of something that I just thought I was going to do. I was like, I'm good at logic and this feels like the natural kind of progression. And then I got into working in the nonprofit world. So I actually started as a 21-year-old working in anti-trafficking and getting the opportunity to be a part of building an organization that was kind of one of the a handful at the forefront of that social issue at the time. And so it was really pragmatically seeing all of these nonprofits around me that would start up and then wouldn't make it to year 3 because for all of the heart and good intention, there really wasn't a sense of of good business acumen, and most nonprofits were not run like a business.
Yeah.
And around that same time, as we were trying to solve this really endemic issue, we were looking at how do people end up vulnerable economically, and how do you move upstream from that vulnerability? And it really came down to job creation. And so it came down to business as a form of addressing root causes of trafficking. And so that led us into I was able to join an impact investment fund, and we were able to help build some businesses upstream of those issues. And so kind of the mix of those things really left me feeling like if I can gain a deeper understanding of the business world and how business works, that will actually best prepare me to make a meaningful impact on these issues. So that's where that kind of evolved to in myself. And then there was a part of it where it was just, I don't think anyone needs any special degree whatsoever. And at the same time, I think sometimes there's just these dreams that form where we can't shake them. And I think there's meaning in that. I think sometimes if you examine it and just really feel called into a certain place or a certain education, I mean, then I say go for it.
Was there anything about Oxford in particular?
It was actually because they were known as having the best social impact program of all MBA programs. So I only applied to 2 schools. I sent in my application from like a Starbucks parking lot the night of, like I was just all very, 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 very last minute.
Yeah.
And I really didn't even, I'd had several friends I'd met through the years who had done the Oxford program and highly recommended it. But I really hadn't overthought. Oxford was like my second choice. It was like I just threw my hat in the ring, and I hadn't even factored in how unbelievably magical the experience of being at Oxford would actually be. It felt like Harry Potter meets a Gilmore Girls episode every night of the week. And so that was just a huge unexpected bonus, because I really went for the social impact kind of entrepreneurship program. I didn't think I would fit in with all the finance people at the many of the big US schools.
Yeah, I love that. Harry Potter meets Gilmore Girls, because so we'll probably talk about this, but like we're for everybody listening, we're having Allie on the show right now, and then in the next hour I'm gonna go swap and go be on her show. So we'll probably talk about it more there. But so I grew up in a trailer in West Virginia, and then ended up in Yale for law school. And we always joke that the dining hall at Yale looks like Harry Potter. And of course, being in New Haven, and it's like Rory Gilmore stomping ground.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I love it.
super resonate
I
with
love
that.
it.
So not Oxford so much, but being that you say Enneagram 3, Wing 4, which is this combination of not only must I have goals, but I must have goals like nobody else has ever had goals, which I super understand.
Yes, totally.
What is something you feel like in your story, you're like, yeah, I was doing that more for checking the box, achieving something, hoping it would make me feel different about myself than like for the thing itself?
Yeah. So just in that example is a perfect one where, okay, I wanted to go to business school. I wanted to learn the language of business. I felt like I was finding myself sitting around a lot of long tables with a dozen, middle-aged men who knew how to speak the language of business and could talk over me. And I realized like, I really just want to learn. I know I have a good intuition for this, and I want to be able to learn the language of business and fill in some of the gaps so that I can, then I can really be empowered in this space. And so when I thought business school, the best business school that I knew of in the US was Harvard. So it was like, I have to go to Harvard, and that's it. And that's the only option. And I applied to Oxford as a backup. And like I said, I was not great on the preparation front. I ordered a study book from Amazon and took like a Saturday studying, and took the test very quickly and just super applied on a whim. Did not get into Harvard. And with that was, had that moment of like, well, maybe it's not meant to be. And then Oxford was just, it was like this like clearing through the trees. And so I had to have these kind of wrestling with God moments of, is that where I'm meant to be? Am I meant to be somewhere that wasn't in my original vision and picture for what this was supposed to look like? And almost releasing this idea of, I think so often we can fixate on something that has less to do with the thing and more to do with our idea of what that success looks like. And so I had to really re-examine and evaluate, why, what am I drawn to in this? Why do I want it? And also trust the process of, I think sometimes the pursuit of our dreams so often doesn't lead us to the thing that we thought we wanted. But where it does take us, it's in the pursuing and in the process that we actually land where we're meant to go. And so it's trusting the pursuit while releasing the outcome, I think is kind of a form of healthy, grounded success.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it really naturally leads me into the next part. You talk about a moment and like, man, how wonderful that this happened for you at such a young age. And that you started to get kind of like that clarity and like that, like, open eyes to like what really matters. You were, rounding out your college education, you're laying on the floor in your apartment with your friends, reading Oswald Chambers' My Utmost for His Highest. And I want to read this passage that you were reading in particular, and I want to kind of like do a deep dive on it with you. The passage goes, "We should never have the thought that our dreams of success are God's purpose for us. In fact, His purpose may be exactly the opposite. We have the idea that God is leading us toward a particular end or desired goal, but He is not. The question of whether or not we arrive at a particular goal is of little importance, and reaching it becomes merely an episode along the way. What we see as only the process of reaching a particular end, God sees as the goal itself." And then you write, "Our life's journey is our life's destination." And so, gosh, first of all, so good. And like, wow, do I wish I would have read that when I was 21 or 22.
Me too.
It would have saved me a lot of time.
But it's like, I need to hear it again right now.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so timeless.
Yeah. So a couple of things that this reminds me of. One is I work with a goals coach named Kim Butler at the White Boardroom. She coaches creative entrepreneurs, Christian creative entrepreneurs. And she is always telling me this quote, "What we achieve in pursuit of our goals is not nearly important as who we are becoming in the process." And I think,
Amen. Yeah.
I think that word process is so
Yeah.
powerful. And you've said it already. And I think that's like the biggest thing I want everybody listening at home to just like spend the rest of your day thinking about that, like being in this process. And really quickly, I want to read you a line I have in the new book, Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots, where I say, "God is a master of both the infinite and the instant who somehow fell in love with the process." Think about it. Here's God who could have 10 separate universes spinning at the end of every one of his fingertips at the mere whisper of a word, every axis trembling at his touch. And yet he spends his days helping me become just a little less selfish, just a little less envious, just a little less wrapped up in things that don't ultimately matter. This God who has infinite now power somehow fell in love with this process over time.
Ooh,
so let's just talk about that.
beautiful.
Let's talk about what it looks like to start to retrain our brains to stop looking at this one day when we get to check the box
Yeah.
and start thinking of every day being just a little bit more carved out, a little bit more molded, this clay in the potter's hands. How do we start to fall in love with that, Allie, instead of the confetti moments?
Yeah, gosh. Well, I think one thing to be reminded of is so often at those confetti moments, it's the thinking about the graduation, so to speak. You really look back and realize that is one dot in the whole trajectory. And all of the good part was everything leading up to that point. It was the whole process. It was, and it was the hard parts too. It was the parts where you're working out and working through the difficult parts. I had a pastor once, he used to say, "We live for the mountaintop experiences, but God is found in the valley." And that's where the fruit grows.
Yeah.
And so thinking about where we're journeying through the valleys, the day in and the day out, is where the fruit of our life is really grown. It's not on the mountaintop experiences that we think we're headed towards. And I feel like I am constantly having to come back to this principle. I love how you articulate the God of the now is also the God of the how, because I think it really challenges us to be present in where we're at, and we can orient ourselves towards where we're going, but to live fully in that presence, whether it's in work. I mean, I'm building a company right now, and it's really tempting to focus on some end result or some outcome, but every milestone you pass just opens up a new kind of set of processes, or a new season of development and what the company looks like. And so that's totally a myth to think that you cross a finish line there. And even in my personal life, I'm in a relationship where it's really easy to start focusing on, okay, well, let's think about, the big decisions and the marriage and kids and family and location and all of these big things, and daily having to come back to, but also let's just enjoy the process and the present and trust that we'll know the big decisions, like how to make them as they come, but let's not lose sight of what's happening in us and between us. So I feel like I'm really actively continuing to learn this and live this out every day in this season of life. How about you?
Oh my gosh. You know what I love about what you just said? Well, first I have to tell you just a little bit of like, the behind the scenes backstory is when I was reading your book last night, I was sitting in my office drinking my tea. And I was reading it, and it's so beautiful, and you're so pulled into the story. And I kept feeling this little like tap in my spirit. And I was like, okay, what is that? And I realized that a little bit of it was kind of grief. Because as you were describing this like love of learning and like being immersed in your classes, first at Westmont and then, going on to Oxford and everything. And I was thinking about, and like, just, I don't know, just, I was picturing you like running around Oxford in these like black robes with like,
Totally.
C.S. Lewis books stacked up or what have you. And for me, what I realized is that going first to college at West Virginia and then on to law school, I don't feel like I enjoyed that as much as I could because I spent the whole time, being in that survival mode, being in that like running from my story, trying to achieve my way into worth, trying to prove that I belonged there, like believing that it was going to be pulled out from under me at any minute. And so I like closed fist, tried to control the whole thing. And I don't feel like I ever fully like allowed myself to be immersed in the experience, to like engage with my professors and have mentors and what have you. I was just like trying not to get caught. You know what I mean? I was trying not to be discovered as a fraud and like thrown out. And so I was just trying to like get through it. And then you get to the end of it and you're like, but I did great. And it was fine. And it wasn't a fraud. And like, can I get a do-over and actually enjoy it this time? And in the first episode of this season, it was a solo episode, I talked about when you finally reach that point where your eyes are opened of how much time, 10 or 20 years you've spent running, trying to achieve your way into worth. Step one is allowing yourself to grieve the lost time. You don't get to get that back, but it's a moment where you can say, what are the next 10 years going to be?
Yeah.
And so that for me is a huge, when you say like, what about you? Like, that's where I am, is like, like, what would it look like for me to go back through that experience just from a place of love of learning and not trying to think about the next big steps, but enjoying where you are right now. So that's a really roundabout answer to your question.
Yeah, no, but Mary, that was also my experience at Oxford was very, it was very both and. It was some of the most incredible memories of my life and friendships and experiences. And at the same time, I was publishing a book while I was there. I was doing a 2-year MBA in 1 year while publishing a book, sending in edits at 6, 7 a.m. and then running to a final exam at 9. I mean, it was really intense. And a part of me grieves that I made it so hard on myself by doing both at the same time. And I felt this constant sense of, and a lot of the students there did, of it's a 1 year break from your life meant to catapult you into whatever the next big thing is. And there's this frenetic energy around, what are you going to make of it? What are you going to do? What's the next big thing? And I feel like there were many times where many of us, but myself specifically, really lost the enjoyment
Yeah.
because there was such a kind of overwhelming sense of, where does this go and what are we doing with it? And everyone's taken out these big student loans to be there and feeling this pressure in their career and trying to
Yeah.
apply for jobs and not hearing back. And so it's, it's just, I really resonate with what you said, because I look, and even while I was there, I'm like, I know I'm going to regret not just being present, but you just can get lost in that success overachiever energy. And when my book came out, that spring, I came back to California and was meeting with a mentor in Santa Barbara and
Mm.
sat down with him. It was 8 a.m. I had no coffee yet. I'm practically like jittering with all of I mean, I was in just classic burnout
Mm.
mode. I mean, I had nothing left in my tank. And I handed him my book and thought he was going to be so proud of me, and I'd finally proven that I could achieve something in the world. And he doesn't even look at it, and he just goes, "Allison, chill the F out." I
Wow.
was like, "Whoa, what?" And he said, "You really need to take a break.
Hmm.
You just need to stop. You need to turn the engine off
Yeah.
and just stop and just be." And so that, I just share all that because that led me into taking a 3 month sabbatical, which is one of the hardest things I have ever done,
Mm.
of literally kind of forgoing the decision to figure out what I'm doing with my life, or where I'm going to live, or how I'm going to make money, or career decisions, and fielding every question from every other student about what's next. Just saying, I don't know, I'm going to rest. It was so difficult, but it helped me finally come to a place of stillness where I was able to see myself as okay without achievement.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most healing things in my entire life.
Mm. Wow, that just made me like exhale just listening to you. I was like, oh,
Mm.
that's so good because there is this like crash that comes after
Yeah.
releasing a book.
Yeah, it
I
really
hit
is.
crazy scare like similar to what you're saying, like scary burnout after you know, writing Dirt, launching Dirt, and then I
Yeah.
went right into writing the second one. And all of last year it was just like I could not come out of that fog.
Yep.
Um, you said that phrase both and it leads me into my next question. When I think about Oswald Chambers' quote, um, there's so much of it that I'm like, yes, like all of that. I super agree with that. But there's also like this like tension for me of like, is there a both and there? Because he says we have the idea that God is leading us toward a particular end or desire goal, but he is not. And that for me, I was like, especially as an Enneagram 4, where we feel like that, like there's something unique about us. Um, I wondered if there could be a both and, if God could be his most important focus is our character shaping and who we're becoming and taking us through that process of
Mm.
transformation. But can he also have a plan for us in terms of where he hopes we end up? This good work that was prepared for us in advance, this plans to prosper and not harm us, to give us hope in a
Yeah.
future. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Can it be both? Can it be both like, yes, he mostly cares about who you're becoming, but there are also places where, in your free will and in your choice, it would be really amazing if you did the good work he has in mind for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. No, I think that's beautifully said. And I say yes, absolutely. As someone who is still perennially building and dreaming and creating. And I always feel this deep sense of, I don't know, I just feel like we've been given so much. And
Mm,
so I have this deep desire to really do meaningful, purposeful things with all that I've been given. And that's a huge driver for me. I think that drive is beautiful. I think
yeah.
dreams and ambitions are beautiful. It's only when we skew it and begin to think that our identity hangs on the outcome of those dreams and ambitions.
Yeah.
Because I think often we don't, there's so much that we don't control. And so I think it's a matter of really being faithful with the pursuit, and then releasing the outcome and um, trusting what God will do with that outcome, and
Yeah.
how we're shaped by the process. Because life is really bittersweet. There are
Mm.
really beautiful parts, and there are really hard parts that hit you out of the blue, that come from left field and you would never see or imagine, or things where you give it your whole heart and your all, and it totally fails,
Yeah.
or like any number of things. And so I think the trust in the process, and that's what was so important for me in taking that sabbatical. I was walking, I was still living over in the UK at the time. I remember walking down the street in London and having this revelation of, if I never produce or succeed at another thing in my life, if the rest of my life is just being, I'm actually really okay with who I am.
Wow.
Like I actually really, I feel God's love for me. I feel immense gratitude for the relationships in my life. And I can, it was from that place of groundedness of, I'm good as me, and I love me as me, and anything I achieve or produce is out of joy,
Mm.
not out of not out of a not out of like a deficiency or a need to prove, or a need to, like my identity didn't hang in the balance anymore. And
Wow.
so that was the key shift.
Ooh, that is so, so good. I'm writing that down to replay that. Yeah, I love that so much. It kind of reminds me of a quote that I want to say it was Emma Lovewell on Peloton. So
Yeah.
some really deep. But she said, "You cannot hate your way into greatness." And I know that like greatness can be a word that is like challenging for Christians. I feel like because they always want to point the greatness to God, they always want to give the glory to God. But I do feel like we're called to excellence, and I do feel like
Absolutely.
there's a greatness that God has in
Absolutely.
mind for us. And you do
Yes.
not get there punishing yourself
Yes.
into it, hating
Yeah.
yourself into it. When
Yeah.
I get there, then I can love myself. No, we love ourselves, and then maybe someday we can get there.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really,
And
really good.
redefining what greatness looks like.
Yeah.
I may think greatness looks like some award on the wall. Greatness actually may be in how I love my next door neighbor, quite literally.
Yeah.
Greatness may be in how I show up in a bad situation that requires integrity, or where my friends can call on me and know that I'm gonna yeah, be there and be loyal to them, whatever it is. I just think widening our aperture for
Mm.
what greatness can look like. And yes, there are for sure the kind of um I don't know, the things you might put in a Wikipedia bio, so to speak,
Yeah.
but true greatness are the things that go in a eulogy. It's like the things that people say about how you loved and your character and how you lived. It goes back to this idea of the God of the how.
Yeah.
And that's where I just think realizing that God isn't just on the edge of his seat. Oh, if only she will, get this article written, and then the universe will finally fall into line. It's like, I just think that God just wants to be with us in the process.
I love that so much. I love that so much. Quick follow up to that because I'm just like,
Yeah.
okay, I want you to bottle that up and sell it because I'll like breathe it in like perfume every day. But genuinely, like the question I always have in this moment, and I bet a lot of people listening do as well, is so I grew up in Appalachia. I grew up in West Virginia. I come from a very, very hardworking family, a very proud family, and a family that can sometimes take pride in the struggle. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is I grew up with the very like unspoken and spoken belief that if you didn't struggle for it, if you didn't have to work really, really hard for it, if you weren't like rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty, you
Mm.
probably don't deserve it. And so that's been a real interesting struggle with grace because you cannot earn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also with everything you're talking about. So if somebody listening is in that same place of like, every time I try to surrender, I just end up feeling like it doesn't count if I wasn't the one who did it. If I wasn't the one
Mhm.
who made it happen, like if it was just a gift, then it feels lazy or it feels unearned. What do you say to
Yeah.
that woman?
Yeah.
And
So
she's me, by the way. That woman is me.
so I would start by truly, truly sitting in what we're grateful for that is just so beyond us.
Mm,
Whether it's like I look at, okay, I have a family that loves me unconditionally. I mean, that is hitting the genetic lottery, right? It's
yeah.
like to have, or friendships that I can call on at a moment's notice and they would be on my doorstep.
Mm,
Or, I mean, so many number of things. And so I think if we start from the place of gratitude for all that we've been given, that's beyond us.
yeah.
I think that that anchor point, then from there, it's okay, what can you do with those incredible things?
Mm,
Even like, I think I often will thank God of like, thank you for giving me a really creative brain.
yeah.
I can see things that other people can't see and make connections and spark ideas and I'm just very, very grateful for this creativity that God hardwired in me. And then it's like, okay, and then how do I harness that and use that to produce outcomes that will impact other people and impact other people's lives because I can. And it's what I'm doing with the gift. And so
Mm,
I think if you start from a gratitude of what you've been given, then the hard work is just working with the raw material.
yeah.
And so it's not like, oh, I just conjured this all up out of nothing. It's like
Mm,
everything was a gift. The
yeah.
fact that I can um, that I don't have a health condition that has me bedridden every day.
Mm,
I mean, that's a gift. And if I did, the gift of time to be rooted and grounded to use that brain more, whatever it is. So
yeah.
I would just, yeah, start with the gratitude and then what can you do? What can you do with what you've been given?
Yeah. I love when you talk about like a family loving you unconditionally and like winning the genetic lottery. And there's also a part in the book where you talk about not only seeing others, but also looking on yourself with gentleness, looking at all humans as like the littlest versions of themselves. Is this what they were like as little kids? And I
Yeah.
just want you to talk about that a little bit. Maybe for somebody who didn't necessarily have that safe place to land of like whether
Yeah.
you get the A or you get the C minus or whatever, like
Yeah.
the love does not change. Talk a little bit about like learning to parent yourself to view yourself through that kindness and gentleness and empathy if you didn't necessarily have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I had it was my ceramics teacher in high school.
Yeah.
First day of class, he would ask everyone to bring in a picture of themselves as toddlers. And he would tape them all up to the wall and then say, I want you all to look at these photos of each other.
Mm,
And anytime you're tempted to be angry or get in a fight about something or be frustrated or just dislike somebody, and he
yeah.
had a picture of himself up there as a 2-year old.
Mm,
He's like, I want you to see the child in each other because it's impossible to not be loving towards a child,
mm,
and this is who everyone is.
yeah.
And so I think to look at ourselves with that same tenderness. We are so unbelievably hard on ourselves. I say things to myself I would never
Mm,
ever say to another human being
yeah.
ever. I would be mortified if that came out of my mouth. And yet we can be so cruel to ourselves and we forget to have that tenderness, that grace, that lovingness towards ourselves. And sometimes I'll kind of almost imagine like, okay, if God gave me the opportunity to take care of these skin and bones and this
Mm,
mind and this life,
yeah.
how do I cherish and care for this person that God gave me to live through?
Yeah.
And how do I be loving towards her and caring towards her? And in the way that we would to a child or to any other person that we cared about. So
Mm.
I think that, and then the other part to your question is something I think a lot about is this idea of limits, of where we've had limits and limitations in our life,
Mm.
or a lack of something. Um, there were times in my life where I felt very alone and had zero friendships and felt very isolated. And those limitations then, I think, built in me incredible empathy for what it feels like to be alone or unwanted, or to feel like you don't belong. And so, as much as I hated that circumstance, it gave me a superpower to be able to empathize
Mm.
with other people and understand something I wouldn't understand having not gone through it. So
Yeah.
I think, as an example, if there were times in your life where you didn't feel that sense of unconditional love, to know the deficiency can be a superpower, to know how to, what it feels like to receive it and to give it,
Mm.
on the other side of that.
Yes, I love that. I love that. There's a line that you have. You're talking when you say it, you're talking about beauty and aging, but I think it also really relates to this idea of there is not a fatal flaw in you. There is not, for
Mm,
everybody listening, there is not this thing, this piece that is missing that means you have to keep going and going and going until you can get to a place of being worthy of love. You say only the perishable can be beautiful, which is why we are not moved by artificial flowers. And
isn't
I
that
think that is so good.
good?
That's so good. And I think like quoting that line and just thinking about it in terms of we think the goal is to be perfect. We think the goal
Yeah,
is to be only highlight reels and to be
yeah,
filter flawless on Instagram. But what we realize is that that's actually nobody can stomach it. It's just far too sweet, right? There's a
yeah,
line I think in Dirt where I talk about like we put on more buttercream frosting, but like it's we want to get to the crumbly center. Like the icing is
yeah,
just far too sweet to be real.
yeah,
And there's also a part where I talk about in Dirt, like this like season when I was first really starting to step into the Christian world. I was speaking at Christian conferences and I felt like I was like doing it all wrong. And
mm,
again, I was going to be like kicked out for not doing it right. And I talked about this pressure it felt like to put on this faux joy because I'm an Enneagram 4. So, like, feeling like in my head, joy at that time was like the half smile on Instagram. And feeling like it was like a perfume you had to put on. And I said, and the ad for this perfume would be like some actress in a field of pink wildflowers, except there's nothing wild about them at all. They're all these forced blooms from a greenhouse in every shade and variety, as long as they're all pale pink. And they're not even, they're all planted in this like artificial floral foam, not
mm,
even real dirt. And like, I feel like that's so much what you're talking about there. Like, we think from a distance those flowers are beautiful, but when you get close, the second you realize it's not real, all of it is
yeah,
for nothing, right? They
yeah,
cease to be impressive because they're artificial. So,
yeah,
talk a little bit to the woman who's listening and she's like, you know what, this is it. I can't, after the last 2 years, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot
mm,
go through the effort of putting on the artificial floral foam anymore. I cannot,
yeah,
just try to be beautiful. And in the process, I'm not even me anymore. Or feel like,
yeah,
that this thing that feels broken to me is actually what makes other people see me as beautiful.
yeah.
What do you say to that woman in terms of just like releasing her hand, releasing that grip of I
Mm,
have to be perfect in order to be accepted?
so good. It brings to mind this quote from the Velveteen Rabbit,
Mm,
where it talks about becoming real,
yeah.
and the bunny saying, as you are loved and your seams start to fray and the fur gets rubbed off, that's actually the process of becoming real.
Yeah.
And that's and I think about that so much. It's like all of those kind of the parts that we want to hide that feel like they've rubbed us raw, or the scars that we hold from the most difficult parts of our lives. Those are actually the parts that make us real and make
Yeah.
us lovable. And I think, as humans, we connect to one another in the real and in the authentic. And that quote you reference of being unmoved by artificial flowers, we're not looking for some perfect fake exterior from any of us. I mean, think about how when you sit down with a friend and she says, "Let me just tell you what's really going on," and starts
Yeah.
crying and pouring her heart out. It's just like there's just this collective sigh that happens of, okay, we can drop into our real selves because there's no pretense anymore. There's
Yeah.
no needing to to live from a certain exterior. We can connect from a level that's soul deep. And I think, yeah, I just think we're all so hungry for it. And I think it's so important to go into yourself and into those difficult parts are actually the parts where people want to meet you at.
Yeah.
Not in the parts that you think the world wants to see.
Yeah.
Everyone is just craving to know that everyone else is struggling too, that we're all struggling. We've all, I barely survived 2020, barely survived.
Yeah.
And to, yeah, to sit in the rawness of that, I think is healing
Yeah.
for all of us.
Yeah. I want to read a quote talking about this whole episode has been about process and embracing the slow journey and the becoming. And you have a quote that says, "Of course, you may end up taking a roundabout course to get somewhere, but what makes the road trip worthwhile may be the very time spent on the scenic route. So
Mm.
ease off the gas pedal a bit and take some time to choose your soundtrack. Stop for photos at the lookouts." And so I'm curious, when you think about Allie in December 2022 and you're looking back on this year, what do you want the soundtrack for this year to be?
Good question. And I forgot about that part in the book. I'm like, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
I needed to hear that. I I feel like I'm in a time right now where everything is just moving really fast and there's so much at once.
Mm,
And I really want to learn how to savor each day,
mm,
savor the process, enjoy the making of things. I kind of, I don't know. I recently was thinking about the analogy of like making really good bolognese pasta. And it's like, if you want to make something that's like so unbelievably amazing, you have to take your time in each step of the process
mm,
and enjoy. You don't just get to throw it all into the pot. And
yeah.
you can, but it's going to be a cheap alternative. If you really want the real thing, you've got to take each step of the process and enjoy each step of it and let it take its time. And
Mm,
so that's what I feel like I'm actively learning right now is to stop trying to rush into whatever that next season is, whatever that next stage is, getting past the work goal or the next relational step or whatever. Yeah, in every area of life right now. Learning to savor.
yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, tell people some more about Copper that's coming out here pretty soon. Copperbooks.com. Tell them more about that. Tell them where they can find you. Tell them where they can find this book. Tell them all the things.
Yeah, thank you. So the thing I've been building all this time, when I was going to release my own book, I felt really discouraged by how there was really no platform for authors to help
Mm,
them reach readers. It felt like every other creator in the creator economy had a social platform built for their needs, whether it was Instagram for photographers or TikTok for dancers, and no one had ever thought about the needs of authors launching a book and reaching readers. And
mm,
so I set out similarly to how my book was the book I wished I had had when I was in my early 20s. I set out to build the company that I wished existed when I was launching my book.
yeah.
So it's an app where you as a reader can not only track and share and recommend books to friends and people who follow you, but also be able to connect with the author directly through discussion forums and live events that happen right in the app. It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So it's called Copper, and would love for I'm not sure when the podcast will release, but if the app is not in the app store yet, sign up for our we have a wait list on our website, and we'll be opening the test flight up to that wait list pretty soon here. It's copperbooks.com. And then And then when we're in the App Store, would love to have you all be a part of that community. This community of listeners is exactly the type of folks that we want to be in community with on the platform.
Love it. And then on Instagram, they can find you
at Allie Bridge, ALLIE Bridge, or at Copper Books.
Love it. Love it. Well, Allie, thank you so much for being here. This was amazing. I just adore you.
Thank you, Mary. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, you too. All right, friends, the book is 22 Letters to a Young Woman Searching for Meaning, but I assure you that 22 or 42, which I'm about to be in a couple months, this book is just for the women, period, in your life. Grab one for yourself, grab one for some friends. We've got Galentine's Day coming up really fast. It would be the perfect gift. And while you're there, make sure you go ahead and get that pre-order in for Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. Make a whole bundle out of it. It'll be amazing. So that Slow Growth can be sitting on your doorstep when it launches on April 5th. And until next time, friends, this is the Mary Marantz Show.